And good morning, Utsada. Welcome to Hindu Lounge. Utsada, this is Hindu Lounge number 58, and we come, as everyone knows now, we come live every week on Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern. And Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact, which is the policy research and advocacy initiative of World Hindu Council of America, or VHPA. We are live every Sunday, as I just said, at 11 o'clock Eastern on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. And I am Ajay Shah. I'm the president of the World Hindu Council of America. And with me, as always, is Utsav Chakrabarti, who is the executive director of Hindu Pact. And Utsada, I see you in a wonderful shirt today. I think you must be celebrating something, right? So, Utsada, what are you celebrating? Welcome to Hindu Lounge.
Namaste Ajay Bhai and good morning and welcome everybody to Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge number 58. So it's been a good run, and today my daughter gave me a T-shirt. Actually, my wife gave me a T-shirt, but so this is my first Father's Day celebration I did, and I'll show you at some point. It says "Awesome Bapu," which means
Wow,
Bapu in
that
Bengali.
is an awesome T-shirt. So that congratulations, and your first real Father's Day, because last year during Father's Day, Maya Durga was less than a year old, right?
That's correct. And last year was really, not a good time to celebrate either. My father was here; he was not doing well, and COVID was, at its worst. So
Right.
this time, this is a great feeling. And apologies for
Right.
starting late. I requested Ajay Bhai that I change into this T-shirt, so we started 5 minutes late.
And then also we had a little bit of problem here. That's so happy Father's Day, Utsada.
Thank you.
Now you got the sound.
Yes, I hear the sound.
It
Yes.
was it was muted. That's why we couldn't hear the sound earlier. But we do have very special tune made for just this episode of Hindu Lounge. And oh, is Maya Durga going to make an appearance today on Father's Day?
Yes,
Maya
Maya Durga
Durga,
made it
Namaste
appearance.
Maya, and happy
Namaskar,
Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. All
Namaskar,
right,
namaskar, namaskar,
Namaskar.
Maya.
All right. Okay. So now that we are on to the Father's Day, Utsada, let's introduce the topics for the day. Utsada, today's topics are rather interesting. I mean, we have multiple topics today, and because Utsada, you may remember last week we started talking about this analysis of social realities of Indian American survey, and we will do part two of that survey today. This is the survey that is conducted by folks at Carnegie Endowment and University of Pennsylvania, and I believe it's Johns Hopkins, right? So those are and it's a really extensive survey of Indian Americans, most of them Hindus, and we started analyzing parts of that survey that were really that dealt with discrimination and politics and stuff like that. And today we'll kind of go over some of the other parts of this survey. This is a this is a 3-part survey, and first 2 parts were released last year and this year, and early this year, and this is the third part, and we will analyze it from the Hindu perspective. Also, that this is also Pride Month, and while we are working on a special show for Pride Month, we will just acknowledge that, talk a little bit about that, and then devote a full show to Pride Month later on. Yesterday was also Juneteenth for the first time. It's a federal holiday now. It's a significant day for all Americans, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And finally, Utsada, yesterday was International Day for the elimination of sexual violence in conflict. And Utsada, Hindus have been uh, victims in of sexual violence in conflict, whether you look at Kashmir or you look at Bangladesh or you look at even the recent elections that happened in West Bengal. And we will talk about that as well, and we'll bring out some of the Hindu issues there. And then finally, Utsada, Hindu good news of the week. We will of course uh, share the Hindu Seva Charity Act of the week, and then finally our regular most anticipated segment. the Hindu phobe of the week. So, Utsada, with that, let's dive into the. We welcome everyone who has joined us. The please, we will post the link where you can call in, you can dial in and join the show and express your opinion. This is an interactive show. We want everyone to participate. We want everyone to join us. So please join us live on this show. This is probably the only show where everyone can just join live and share their opinion on American Hindu issues. So we were talking about this survey last week, right? And this is an interesting survey. The only thing that kind of it's a very extensive survey, as we talked last time. The margin of error is only 1.8%. It is based on the panel kind of methodology from the YouGov. So YouGov has apparently a 1.8 million Indian American panel, and the respondents, they selected over 1,000 respondents from this particular panel. And what struck me, Utsada, is that 27% of the and 20 of the respondents were H-1B visa holders. And this kind of should reflect on the fact that why the H-1B issue is really important for Hindus, and why there was why there is a there is a movement um, from Hindus to say that, hey, look, people are waiting on this particular visa for 10 years, 15 years. We need to get them into a proper, residential, permanent residency and stuff like that. And these are the most productive citizens that America will ever have, very highly qualified, and certainly people who would keep America at the forefront of science and technology and other areas. 18% of the non-residents were significantly youth. So that 18% of the non-residents were on H4 visa. And these are the people who are the immediate family members of H1B visa. And as you can imagine, Utsada, these are the people who are, most of them are highly qualified, and they just can't work. They're on H4 visa category, and they just in a waiting game. So this is something that is also of concern to Hindus. Now, 14% of the survey participants were F1, J1, M1 visa. So these are the students or scholars who have come on exchange visa and things like that. So this one is an interesting category. The reason I say that is because these are the people who are generally quite new to America, maybe a year, 2 years. Some of them are PhD students, there are very few. But most of the people who are on F1 come from master's degree, a vast majority. And so they don't really have that. And people who are on J1 who are postdocs are here for 2 or 3 years. They stay on J1 visa. Now, there are some people who are much longer, but most of the J1 visa holders are a year or 2 or 3 before they move on to other visa categories like H1, or they get residency, permanent residency. So that the one thing that really kind of bothered me a little bit about this survey is that 14% people on F1 or J1 or M1 category may skew the results of the survey in a way that may not be truly reflective of people who know America. And I think that who are just recent arrivals and things like that. So that is one part. And so the last part before please I seek your comment is, for those who respondents who migrated to the United States, over half of them, okay, 60% have arrived in America after year 2000. 17% arrived in 1990s, and only 13% arrived in US in 1980s, and just 10% before 1980s. So the almost 77% of the respondents to the survey are in America since year 2000. Okay, so that your comments on immigration, H-1B, and permanent, and the timeline for the arrival of Hindus in America.
So Ajay bhai, just so that our audience remembers, this was a conversation we were having last time, Hindu Lounge 57, in which we did an analysis, especially on the basis of how people feel discriminated from the same survey in the last show. So in this show, we are actually analyzing the demographics of the people who were surveyed and some of the other topics which were discussed in this survey. So, and I really like the fact, as you mentioned, that the survey has very low margin of error. So it's really a very comprehensive survey. And as many of us realize that this is very critical for understanding how Indian Americans think and how Hindu Americans, which about whom we are talking mostly in these shows, continue to think. So what we need to also understand in analyzing this survey is that not everything that we see in this survey is something that we may like. There are lots of things that we don't like to know or don't like to hear, but those are the somewhat facts of how Indian Americans live in America. And what is unique, as you mentioned, Ajay Bhai, is that 60% plus of the Indian Americans are actually, in America and who are surveyed here are in America after the year 2000. So most of them have come in the last 20 years. That's a demographic data point that is very critical for the Hindu American community, because it is this group that already has or will have kids that will be going to colleges in America, that will be going into the higher echelons of civic society in the next 10 years, I would say. And that would actually make a huge difference. And that's why it is important for Hindu Americans to look into this segment of population. So that, I think, is very important for us to look while we are studying this survey. Another thing that I think is very relevant is the H-1 visa that you pointed out. And that is relevant because Americans have a very, most American politicians have a very skewed and very, I would say, a not so positive approach towards H-1. They continue to delay green card process in America. And this is true about both political parties. They have their own reasons and their own justifications why they do it. But they continue to delay H-1 visa, from letting H-1 visa people to become green card. And that is not only bad for America, but it is extremely damaging to the Hindu American community, because what is happening is that these people are high performing individuals with good education that really can contribute to the American economy in more ways than just be job holders. They are the job creators, actually. And by continuing to let these people not get green card, in fact, they're working very hard not to let them have green cards. These, the American government and the different political parties that are involved in the government are essentially stifling America's growth. Just from their own perspective, that is not good. From the Hindu perspective, what is happening is that these people could be part of a much more vibrant Hindu society that is far more integrated into America, that has far more say in America, and that is politically very active in America. And because they are continuously waiting for green card and not getting involved in the social sphere around them, in the civic interaction around them, in politics, they are pretty much being stifled in America, and their participation in the society is being stifled. So this is really unfortunate. And I think that's why Hindu Americans who are citizens in America, who are green card holders in America, should double their efforts to try to ensure that H-1 people on H-1 who are waiting for, almost a generation now, literally some of their kids are, some of the people who are on H-1, their kids have to register to go to college as foreign students, as if they were never in America, even though they spent 15,
Well,
16
actually, it's
years.
much worse than that, Utsada, because when the kids turn 18, they actually have no legal status in America. So
Correct.
not just they may, if they don't have if they don't convert their visa to some other visa status, then they may actually have to end up leaving the country, that the only country that they know, and their
Correct.
parents are still here. So that makes it very unusual kind of situation, right?
It almost treats them like illegal citizens. It treats them like people who came to America illegally, and that is the most unfortunate part. And I think this survey highlights that. This survey highlights the fact how demographically we are in we have been forced into a disadvantageous position. And unfortunately, I see most American Hindus, because we talk about Hindu Americans here, but most Indian Americans who have citizenship, who came here in the 80s and 90s and earlier, who have green cards, really do not stop caring about the H-1 visas, and some of them never even get to know what 60% of the Indian Americans and Hindu Americans are going through.
Right. So the let's look at the. Let me share my screen and let me show you some other components of the survey and get your take on that. So that the other part is where do people? So this is the comparison between a couple of surveys that have happened in past, and you can see here that in and these are two different surveys, probably two different methodologies, but you can see that uh, the the trends, the people with number of people U.S. citizenship is up in the second survey done in 2020. Again, they're two different organizations and methodologies, so it's not really apple to apple comparison, but you can see that. The median household income is lower, but I think that also that is because 14% of the survey respondents in the IAAS 2020 survey were either students, F1 or H1 visa holders, sorry, F1, J1, and M1 visa holders, and these are not the people who make a lot of money. And I think that kind of skews the income level a little bit. But you can also see that that effect, because a lot of people come for graduate degree and all that, so you can see that the age 25 and older with college degree is about the same or maybe a little bit more. And the fact that a lot of them are in F1 and J1 category is reflected also in the fact that 65% of the respondents in the 2020 IAAS survey are married. So you can see the trend is towards younger, more college going postdoctorals, research scholar category, and that's why that number is so. But even with that, Indian Americans are the most prosperous minority in America. So where do they come from? And this shows that most of the people are coming from either west or in south. A few from the east, not that many from the middle part of India, and if you look at it, I mean, 60% of people are, I would say, sorry, about 45% of people in India have mother tongue Hindi. But if you look at the data here, only about 19% of people are Hindi speaking. So the Hindi belt, if you will, is not as highly represented. But if you can see that there are a lot more people, it's a fairly diverse group. And we always have said that Hindus are not a monolithic community in America, and that is reflected from the regions that they come from and from the kind of languages they speak. Sudha, your comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Ajay bhai. As most of our audience can see, American Hindus really are one of the most linguistically diverse communities in that lives in America and lives anywhere in the world. And Hindus in general are very, very linguistically diverse because, what binds them together is Hindu Dharma, but, they have different script, they have different languages, they have different, regions and food habits that they come from. And this is just a survey of Indian Americans. So this only covers the Indian Hindus, ethnically Indian Hindus. It is not even covering the Hindus who are from other parts of the world, from Indonesia, Malaysia, from Bangladesh. I would say covers a little bit of the Bengali aspect, but they're still from a different part of the.
But they will probably not be surveyed for this one because
Correct,
this is only for
exactly. So
Indian
so
origin.
they're a separate identity. Nepal has a huge diaspora population. They are not covered in this. And then of course you have African American, Latino, and white American Hindus who are Hindus who were born in this country or are from some other parts of the world. So of course there are Caribbean Hindus who also are not covered in this survey. So this is actually very interesting because just in the survey that covers Indian Americans, you can see that Hindus literally have less than 20% singular linguistic group. So There is no one language that dominates the Hindu community in America. And that is something I really think VHP America, World Hindu Council of America, and all other Hindu organizations that work in the Hindus social sphere should take real cognizance of. So, one of the takeaway lessons from this survey for us should be that, hey, there are 6 languages that have equal share almost in American Hindu communities. So maybe we should have more presence of other languages, and we should teach other languages in our classes, for example. So that's a takeaway lesson I would say we should have for ourselves.
Absolutely. So that I want to point you to this next slide. And that is that is an interesting social kind of trend as to where do the Indian Americans or Hindu Americans, how do they marry and who do they marry? So that let me share the screen and show you this particular graphic. Now you can see this one, so that this one says that the if for most of the people who are born uh, in in US, sorry, most of yeah, rather most of the people uh, who are born in India have their spouses of Indian origin. Okay. Whereas, and that number, as you can see, is 77% versus 40% of the people who are US born. Only 40% of the people who are born in US have spouses that are of Indian origin. Um, but if you add the number of spouse of Indian origin born in US, then and add the two numbers up, then 71% of people of Indian origin are marrying Indian people of Indian origin, right? And the people who are born in India, the number is well over 83%.
So Ajay bhai, I think there is something interesting to observe here. So what it points out is that people who are Indian Americans who are born in America, so basically American Hindus, about 71% of them would marry other American Hindus, approximately in that range. And so it's more than 70% who would marry other American Hindus. They may the remaining 30% may marry outside the Hindu community or outside the Indian origin community in America. This is about those who are born in America. Now, I think the people who are born in India and who come to America on visas and then live here, more than 83% of them are marrying to somebody who is also coming from India, who's born in India. Part of this reason, I think, is the H-1 visa. And I would say, they prefer, because they are not green card holders in America fast, they have to, they are always India focused. Their gaze is still towards India because they don't know if they can make a life in America because of the uncertainty of the H-1 visa. So I think that drives the fact that they are always looking back, and that brings a cultural affinity, which is good for India, for I guess. But yeah.
So there's another way to look at it also, right? And that is that, look, I mean, 71%, I mean, there's not that big a difference. 71% of the people who are born outside of India are marrying people of Indian origin. Now, 29% are not, and that is because you have to factor in other issues than the cultural cultural gaze or lens that you that you alluded to. And that is, I think it's also that people, when they go to high school here, when they go to colleges here, they grow up in the neighborhoods here, they meet a lot of people who are not Indian origin. It is surprising that despite of all that, those who are born and brought up in Indian households, of people of Indian origin households, only 29% are not marrying, uh, have spouses that are non-Indian origin. So I think that number is, it's actually surprising to me that it's such a small number. Now, I know that a lot of Indian organizations in the communities have activities ranging from bal vihars and youth camps and all the other the social gatherings that parents have over on Fridays and Saturdays with other Hindus and Indians. I think that may play a larger role here in retaining almost 71% of people within the Indian and Hindu fold. I'm not making a comment whether it's good or bad or whatever. It's just a comment as to why it is surprising. I don't know how it compares with other ethnicities. So, for example, if someone is coming, someone is, say, a Vietnamese immigrant, or someone is a Korean immigrant, what percent of the Korean immigrants or Vietnamese immigrants or Filipino Americans or immigrants from Africa or immigrants from various parts of Europe, how much they how much of their what percentage rather of their spouses are also from the same same country of origin. That would be an interesting comparison to have. I doubt if it is this large.
I agree with you. So, yeah, this is also a very good point, Ajay bhai, and it points to the ethnocentric and identity of the Indian American community. So, it stays ethnocentric. That's one of the takeaways from this survey, is that Indian Americans tend to get married overwhelmingly, whether they are born in America or whether they are born in India. Vast majorities of them tend to marry other Indian Americans. I'm not saying this specifically Hindu Americans, even though Hindu Americans are equally part of it seems to me. But it's also true about, in general, about Indian Americans who are not Hindus as well.
Yep. So go to the next one, and this is now we're getting into even a more interesting part of the survey, and this is how many of these people are Hindus. And so that keep in mind that India is 82% Hindu. Now, this survey, if you were to believe it, um, only 54% are in this survey call themselves Hindus. Now, you have to add other things to this, and that is, if you were to add nothing in particular, atheist, agnostic, I mean, these are most of the most of these people are probably Hindus in there. So if you add that number, so it's about another 16%. Okay, um, so that now takes you to 70%. I don't
Correct.
know what the something else is. Because the Sikh and Jain are not represented here, I would consider, and that number adds up to about 6%. So I would say that 6% here is probably the broader dharmic community. 1% is Buddhist. So the 7% is Sikh, Jain, Buddhist. So the broader dharmic community. So I still think that the survey in some ways um, underrepresents the number of Hindus. Um, I don't know why that would be, but I don't think that many Hindus convert. So it is
So
it's a
I know,
very
Ajay bhai,
backwardated
why.
view.
So, when you say India is close to 80% Hindu, you have to understand that in India, constitutionally, Jains and Sikhs are constitutionally considered Hindus as well. Uh,
Not in the number I gave you, Utsada. The
okay.
number 82% I gave you does not include 3% Sikh, about 1% Jain, and about 2 or 3% Buddhist.
Okay.
And here too, they are classified separately.
Okay. So I correct myself then, because in that case, I think what we should take away from this particular number of only 54% of the Indian Americans surveyed here calling themselves Hindu, is that a larger number of Indian Americans in America compared to India, back in India, are who are Hindus. A larger number of them present themselves as undefined, or not. We don't really want to talk about it, or don't want to mention our religion, nothing in particular. So, and that is, I think, a very big number to look at, which means amongst the slightly relatively higher educated Hindus, the possibility of more Hindus not identifying as Hindus in the educated segment could be higher. I'm saying could be because it's not clear from this survey. Also, there could be also the number of atheist and agnostic, again, which is a similar trend, where
If you add that up, it's still about 70. So we're still missing about 10.
which means that there is a larger number of people emigrating outside India who are from the Christian and the Muslim communities. I would say
So
primarily the Christian community, because if you notice here, if you combine the Protestant and the Roman Catholic and in the
That is
survey,
certainly an overrepresentation.
that is
Yeah.
a way more overrepresentation of Christian population in the diaspora in America than there are actually Christians in India. But we have to remember that many times Christians in India are undercounted because there is a massive conversion operations that happen over the last 10 years, which may or may not have been reflected in the survey. So in India itself, the number of Christians may have grown, and many of them are not counted as Christians, probably are counted as Hindus, because of very aggressive conversion activities. And that number may be accurately represented here, because here you are seeing Protestant 4%, Roman Catholic 5% amongst the Indian Americans, which means between them they
Eastern
have 10%
Orthodox
of the population.
2%. There is also Eastern Orthodox 2%.
Correct,
So
correct. So
actually, in this chart, almost 11% are Christians.
that is very interesting, because you would assume that Eastern Orthodox Christianity comes primarily from Kerala in the Indian subcontinent.
Right.
And if you look at the map showing immigration from Kerala, the immigrant population in terms of the share of the population was not that high. So what it means is that there is a larger segment of the Christian population from Orthodox community in Kerala, Christian Orthodox community in Kerala, that is emigrating compared to the Hindu community. So in general, two things to note here. Number one, more Christians are emigrating out of India. Disproportionately more Christians are emigrating out of India to America. That is understandable. America is a Christian majority country, easier for them to immigrate. And the second point is that Christians in general are more in India than we know based on the survey, because there's a lot of conversion activities in India, and that is why in America those Christians are getting actually counted, because they're calling themselves Christian.
And if you look at this, Utsada, this one is importance of religious identity. And that really is the heart of a lot of things that we do about Hindu identity. If you can look at this, Utsada, um, when it comes to uh, religious identity being very important, right? Only about 31% of Hindus say it's very important. 59% of Muslims say it's very important, and 58% of Christians say it's very important. However, if you would add very important and somewhat important, now Hindus go up to 77%. And of course, the Muslims go up to about 60, 70, 87%, I guess, if I'm counting it right. 60, 70, 80, 87% for 87% for Muslims, and about 87% for Christians as well. So it's 77% versus 87%. Um, so that, you know, so that I want to compare and contrast that. And then, I want to compare and contrast that with the Pew survey that came out, I think last year or year before, where they said that um, you, compared to other faiths, including Islam and Christianity, very few Hindus actually convert out of Hindu dharma. So 80% of Hindus remain Hindus, whereas in case of Muslims, only 75% um, of Muslims remain Muslims. Now, that was a broader survey, and you can have the regional effects, like people from some other countries who are Muslim maybe converting or not converting, or not staying Muslim or staying Muslim. We have to dig deeper into that. And I don't have those numbers with me. But so that you can see that even though Hindus are not as if you look at the number of times go to religious services once a week or once or twice a week, those numbers for Hindus are much smaller. Only either once or several times a week to once or twice a month. Hindu numbers are only about 43%, whereas in case of Christians, actually that number adds up to 70%. So huge difference as to uh, you know number of times they visit the places of religious worship, right? Or religious services. Now, it is true that a lot of Hindus have temple in their own home, so they don't really have to go to a mandir. And there's no real mandate that once a week you have to go, or 5 times a day you have to pray, and that is reflected in frequency of prayers. As you can see, the Hindus, once or several times a day is 40%. What is interesting is that, even though in Islam, praying 5 times a day is critical to the practice of Islam, only 58% do that, whereas 66% of Christians seem to be practicing, or rather praying once or multiple times a day. So taken all together, it seems like the Christian identity in America among Indian Americans is much more pronounced than Hindu identity is. And Muslim identity as well is a lot more pronounced. Uh, but 86% of Muslims, Christians, either once or more time a day, whereas less than 80% in case of Muslims. Your thoughts?
So I'll make a couple of points on this. This is a very important part of the survey when it concerns the Hindu American community, because the couple of takeaways that we can get out of this is: number one, Hindu Americans are somewhat religious, not very religious in their expression, and that is very typical of how Hindu Dharma itself promotes. It's not a religion that is assertive. It has never been. That is its strength. That is also its weakness. That is number one. So Hindus are in general religious, but they are not aggressively religious like Indian Christians and Indian Muslims who live in America. That is very important to understand. Point number two to take away from this is that Indian Muslims largely are very religious in America and will continue to stay religious they're not disillusioned with Islam, even though more Muslims generally in America are disillusioned with Islam than Hindus. And that could be because, and again, this is not part of the survey, but my observation comparing it to the Pew survey, prior Pew survey, has been that Muslims coming from many Middle Eastern countries that are very fundamentalist in nature, like Iran, like even Syria, Iraq, Central Asian countries, Uzbekistan. So many of these countries which have strong Islamic population segments within them, when they come to America, they try to leave Islam more likely. And that could be the reason why the Pew survey shows more Muslims leaving Islam than Hindus leaving Hinduism, even though Indian Muslims stay very, very aggressively loyal to Islam. Number three, to take away from this, that the most religious community of all Indian American communities is the Indian Christian community that lives in America. And I think that is because there is a strong Christian identity in America. These Indian Christians, when they are in India, are more involved in a society where there is pervading Hindu culture around them. So they may be likely less fundamentalist in their presentation of themselves, because most of them are converts from Hindu Dharma in some previous generation, and they continue to carry some of the Indian culture with them, Hindu culture with them when they are in India. In America, they come in contact with a far more stronger Christian identity, especially in places where, the Bible Belt or in Southern American churches, and they can probably be more Christianized when they come to America. That's what the survey seems to be showing. And more importantly, last point, Hindus don't go to temples as much as Indian Christians go to churches, and Indian Muslims go to mosques. And you rightly pointed out, Ajay Bhai, that could be because Hindus are far more decentralized. Hindus can pray and do puja at home without feeling the need to go to temples. Hindus are not congregational in nature. The religion has been less, historically, Hindu Dharma is far less congregational than any of the other major religions of the world. So I think that explains these trends. And I think these things we already knew. In fact, I'm more encouraged that nearly 77% of the Indian Americans who were surveyed call themselves Hindus. So not Indian Americans, 77% of the Hindu Americans are proud to be Hindus in some way. So that's a good number to look at, and
That's a good number.
That's very encouraging for us.
There's one issue that is somewhat surprising, and that is, um, America is a lot less Christian country than it used to be 30 years ago in terms of practices. I'm not talking about numbers alone. in terms of practices, so if you look at the number of people who are going to church every Sunday, that number has gone down significantly. Although that number is not that low in the immigrant community, but in general in America, people calling themselves Christians, people going to church week in and week out, that number, Utsada, has gone down significantly. And I think, but I guess that is not yet reflected in this survey of Indian Christians. And that, we have to see how all of these numbers are really for, reflective of how the first and second generation who were really influenced by first generation think. Um, all immigration really, it takes about three generations or four generations to become, uh, you know, you know, to become completely immersed in the native culture. So I think that a real test will come in next, I said, 30 years as to where all these trends are, because as time goes on, people lose their immigrant roots, and we have to see how this plays out. So that the next is the identification, self identification. This number has always been interesting to us, right? And I think we might have talked about it in past, in not we might have, we have talked about it in past multiple times. And so that this is the one which is my pet peeve, and I know it's yours too. And that is the, what do the Indian Americans call themselves? And so that in some ways, it is hard. I think we talked about it last time that in our, this actually chart we did talk about last week. So we don't need to spend too much time on it, but suffice it to say that South Asian identity, which is the most Hindu-phobic term that ever was invented, does not get much traction. It has got a lot of traction among non-Hindus. So most of the non-Hindus, especially the Muslim Hindus, would call themselves South Asian as per this survey, but not as many Hindu Indians. And NRI is a term that just is not taking off, except in legal, Indian, if you have to deal with Indian embassy and you have to do legal paperwork for people of Indian origin, kind of paperwork and things like that. So we talked about that last week, so we don't need to spend too much time. But any comments on this, on the South Asian and NRI?
The only thing I can reiterate is that this is a very good pointer of the fact that Muslims of Indian origin feel very hesitant to call themselves Indian Americans and are largely going to call themselves South Asians over the next generation. And that, I think, is primarily validation of the fact that that Muslim, pan-Islamists have tried to promote and have successfully promoted quite a bit, is that Islamic identity permeates borders and nationalities, and that is a cause for concern for India, if I can put it very bluntly.
Yeah. So I want to go to the next one, and which is the Indian American political engagement by immigration status. I believe we touched upon this last time also, and this is, it's reflective in some ways in the, how people are comfortable in the new country to be active in in politics and social issues. You can imagine, I mean, people who are first generation, uh, and they're, they don't have the safety net that people in second generation have, and they came here for education, they came here to for economic reason most of the time, and they want to just head down, kind of work, and make a life for themselves and their kids. And that is what is reflective in the fact that they are not as politically engaged in American life. And their kids who have the safety net of their parents, and who don't have as the economic compulsions of their parents, and have gotten good education, who have lived American life right from when they were born, went to high school here, went to college here. They have a very different, set of opportunities in public life that are available to them. And I think this particular slide, this particular data on slide number 15 here, or figure number 15, is reflective of the fact that the second generation has a lot more opportunity uh, and comfort in American life than the first generation did. And you can see, I mean, the number of appointees in Trump administration, Obama administration, and a Biden administration, starting from the vice president down to the key staff in several agencies, and everyone are people of Indian origin with and Hindu background. That was true for Trump administration, and it is reflective of, as years go by, you'll see more and more Indians in mainstream politics, prominent places in mainstream politics. And what better than to have a vice president with the Indian lineage, right? Now, what India gets out of it, or what Hindus get out of it, is a completely different question. But we have had governors who are Indians. We have had now vice president who's Indian. So uh, you know that bodes well for the Indian immigrant community in general. You have to see what it entails. What is the what do the Indian community in US or India as a country gets out of it.
So Ajay bhai, I think what is very clearly visible from this chart is that, again, because of the delay, the tragic delay in getting green cards for the H1 people, the Indian Americans who are non-citizens and who are waiting for their green cards on different visas are far more likely to not come out in the open and express themselves. And that is causing a huge damage to the community. What is even worse is that many of the second generation Indian Americans, most of whom are Hindu Americans, I would say, also uh, don't care. Actually, that is a bigger cause of worry, because the the green card issue has not been put out positively enough. I mean, you will see Indian Americans who are engaged in politics far more worried about other victimhood issues in America, which may be genuine, but they are willing to ignore their own community's victimhood because the community has not been talking about it. And they have not been talking about it because they are afraid to go out in the public space and engage in the social political sphere, because they're afraid of their immigration status, even though most of them are legal. So that is something that those who are citizens in America of Indian origin have to rectify and work extra hard towards.
I agree. So that completes the analysis of the survey. Any final comments before we move on to the next topic that we have for the day? And we have a lot of
My
good
final
topics today.
comments is that this survey validates many of the things we are concerned about, many of the things we want people to work on. We want more Hindu American engagement in politics. We want more Hindu American participation in the social spheres, and we want Hindu Americans to continue to express themselves as Hindu Americans. I think that is very important, because they are doing worse than Indians of other, Christian and Muslims, as you can see from here.
So thank you, and let's go on to the next topic. And as we go into the next topic, here is I yesterday. So the was the let me share my screen because we put out a really good graphic on behalf of Hindu Pact, and we should thank Dhanesh for doing that. He's our student intern, and he created this graphic on Juneteenth. So the yesterday was Juneteenth, and we commemorated. It's a federal holiday now this year. It commemorates the emancipation of slaves in the United States, and the history also that is for the Juneteenth history in America is that it was on June 19th, 1865, that the news of emancipation reached to the deepest part of the Confederacy, that is in Galveston, Texas. And when that news reached Galveston, Texas, the last of the slaves there were freed, or the last of the slaves in America were freed. And so that this is a really dark part of American history, that people who were people who were enslaved, people who were uh, for generations, who were oppressed in the worst possible way, And if you read the narratives of people who were abducted from Africa and who were put in these, some of these buildings still exist as museums and historic monuments. They were put there, and then they were put on these ships where thousands of people actually died just while coming from in a journey from Africa, rowing the boat to America, and then being sold, and then separated from families and treated as inhumanely as you can imagine. And these slaves were eventually freed after the Civil War. And today and yesterday was the day that commemorated and this emancipation of slaves after the Civil War. So that from on behalf of Hindu Pact and Hindus, uh, we many all of us actually in many ways enjoy the the hard work and uh, the fruits of enslavement without really paying our due. And I think because we are recent immigrants, we got a lot of things were easy for us in many ways, but we have to we from the bottom of our heart we thank the people who toiled uh, for centuries to make America what it is. And that
Absolutely,
too, so the
absolutely.
yeah.
And I my congratulations to Danesh for posting on Juneteenth on the Hindu Pact Twitter and Instagram accounts. And I think we should never lose sight of the fact that for hundreds of years before Hindu Americans were in significant numbers in America, there were other Americans who fought and who gave a lot of sacrifices to make America a place where equality was respected and attempted to, or and strived for. And that was not true when America was created. So that's
And the
something.
people on union people who fought the Civil War, and people who who gave life for this emancipation cause. I mean, this is it is not just it is a long struggle. It took about 200 years of
Absolutely. And we are all in, and every community in America who has enjoyed the fruits of equality and constitutional fairness has a debt to pay to these people who gave their lives for getting this. So Juneteenth is a day to remember their sacrifices and their contribution.
absolutely. So the next one was also a significant day yesterday, and let me bring that screen up so everyone can see what was yesterday. Also, was um, the the day where it was the in violent conflict and sexual oppression during violent conflicts, and it was a day to recognize that yesterday, right? And we talked about in this show, we have talked about the Kashmir issues, and we talked about Bangladesh issues, and how um, the Hindu women were exploited in these international conflicts. And yesterday was a designated day by United Nations to recognize this particular aspect of the international conflict. You're on mute, Utsada.
Correct, Ajay bhai. You rightly pointed out, and this is something that we have to be very, as much as it is important in the American context to respect and recognize Juneteenth for the value that it has in the life of every American, because Juneteenth reminds Americans of what the sacrifice was to gain equality. Similarly, Similarly, it is important to remember the role of conflict and the effect it has in terms of sexual violence on people. And there is no community that has suffered as much. And I say that in a very thoughtful way. There is no religious community that has suffered as much sexual violence in conflict than the Hindu community in the last 1,000 years. And this is not based on just what Hindus have remembered and experienced. This is based on what the aggressors took pride in documenting. So, yesterday was the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. And as Hindu Americans, it is very important that just in the last 50 years, there have been two major events in which literally close to hundreds of thousands of Hindu women were raped as part of conflict. So if you remember the 1971 conflict, where close to 400,000 Hindu women were raped in just 1 year, in 1971, in Bengal, in East Pakistan, what was East Pakistan then, Bangladesh now. And in 1989, this is happening in India, in Hindu majority India. In 1989, thousands of Kashmiri Hindu women were raped in Kashmir Valley, which led to an exodus that rendered them internally displaced. 500,000 Kashmiri Hindus. And this is a very small community. Its entire community got displaced from the Kashmir Valley in 1989. So these are just two incidents in the last 50 years. I
Well,
can
there's
go
the
back.
incident of last month in West Bengal in the
Correct.
post-election violence.
Correct. But that's internal election-based conflict. I'm talking of militarized conflicts that are happening around the world, and Hindus are significantly victims of that. We can literally have a show that go back 1,000 years to document how Hindu women, especially, have been subjected to sexual violence as part of geopolitical conquests and military conflicts targeting India and the Indian subcontinent. We can have a show on it.
Absolutely, and we should. Uh, so the next topic we will cover in a lot more detail, but I just want to kind of mention that this is Pride Month, and from the Hindu perspective, I can just say that we Hindu faith as a faith, as a tradition, as a religion, as a dharma, Hindus have not ever discriminated against anyone based on their gender or sexuality or sexual preference. And on behalf of Hindu Pact and VHPA, I want to, we want to make this statement that we we will always stand by equality and equal rights for everyone, and we will do a full show on this in the coming weeks. But I just as we commemorate the Pride Month, I just want to say that as Hindus, we stand by equality and we stand by acceptance of all, regardless of any kind of division, outward division that people may see.
That's correct. And if you look at the Itihasas and if you look at the Puranas, Mahabharata, Bhagavata Puran, all are replete with references to gender fluidity and acceptance of transgenders as well. So, there is a very clear identification with non-discrimination of people across the gender spectrum, across the sexuality spectrum, and that is very unique to Hindu dharma. It is very, very unique. It is the only major religion in the world that actually accepts and embraces everybody, and in fact depicts them in its iconography, in its theology, and skillfully navigates the ambiguity of the interpretations. This is something that is ingrained in the Hindu theology, in the Hindu philosophy for thousands of years. It is only recently that in the Western democracies, the LGBTQIAA plus community is embracing this ambiguity. But it is intrinsic to Hindu belief, Hindu practices, Hindu iconography, and Hindu theology for thousands of years. And that is something that is not recognized. It's not recognized by Hindus. It's not recognized obviously by non-Hindus. And it is even worse is that the LGBTQIA plus community doesn't even recognize it within the Hindu community. They continue to oppose Hindus, simply copying their Western counterparts who oppose Christianity, which has inbuilt structures that render people with gender diaspora and sexuality differences as sinners. So, it's a lesson for our community. Take pride in what is good, and let's move forward. We'll have a
Right.
show on
So
this.
the okay, next one. Thank you. And next is, so now we go into our um, regularly scheduled, regularly scheduled segments. So the first one is Hindu Good News of the Week. And what better way to start Hindu Good News of the Week than with a nice cheer? So the Hindu Good News of the Week, as I share my screen, is TTD, which is the uh, 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 Tirupati Devasthanam, is going to build the Venkateshwara Mandir in Kashmir within 18 months. And you can see that they've already performed the groundbreaking of the Bhumi Puja in over there. And remember, Kashmir is the place where hundreds of mandirs have been destroyed in just last few decades. And if you go back in history, it is the land of Kashyap Muni. It is a land of, in many ways, the most holiest of Hindu Dharma, where very few temples are left. And after the Article 370 was removed, now you can see that for the first time, actually, a new Hindu mandir is being built in Kashmir, and one of the richest mandirs in Bharat, the the Tirupati Mandir, and the trust that controls the Tirupati Mandir is actually going there and building this mandir. So this is a great news for Hindus, that Hindu Dharma is once again going to be, uh, you know, is going to be celebrated. It's going to be worshipped, and people are going to be able to worship Hindu Dharma in Kashmir.
Ajay bhai, thank you for mentioning that, because something more needs to be said about specifically a temple to Lord Vishnu in Kashmir, because for followers of history and scholars out there, most people identify Kashmir and its history of the Hindu history in Kashmir, which goes back thousands of years, to Shaivism, Kashmiri in the Kashmiri monism, the Shaiva tradition that very, very profound, very, very deep in terms of philosophy and history. So most people identify Kashmir with Shaivism. Most people identify Kashmir with Kashmiri Hindu religion with Shakta traditions, the worship of Devi Durga. And historically, people think that Hindu Dharma in Kashmir is related to only Shaiva and Shakta traditions. Very few people know that actually, this is something unique about Hindus everywhere. And this is something that our, the left woke people don't want to talk about, is that for every Shaiva Hindu or every Shakta Hindu, patron that you will find in history, you will see that they have also patronized Vaishnava tradition and vice versa being underlined here. So in Kashmir, what many people don't know is that there were temples to Lord Vishnu in Parihaspur, which is very close to Srinagar, and the temple of Mukta Keshava, the Parihas Keshava, these are all Vishnu temples. So as much as Kashmiri Shaiva traditions are known for their contribution to Hindu Dharma, similarly Vaishnava traditions in Kashmir were very, very popular too. And it's very historical. There was a temple to Avanti Swami, a temple to Vishnu known as Avanti Swami, also in Avantipur, which is still a place in Kashmir. There is an Indian Air Force base there near Srinagar. So I can go on for another 1 hour on Kashmir history. And
That will be a separate show.
so basically, Ajay bhai, we created 4 different shows today.
We created 4 different shows here, which is not a bad thing, because we are always looking for good topics, right? So that with that, the Hindu Seva Act of the Week. And as always, here is the music to commemorate that.
मनसा सततं स्मरणीय
So that once again for Hindu Seva Act of the Week, I nominate the VHPA's fundraising effort for COVID-19 efforts in India. As you can imagine, the COVID situation in India is now improved. We no longer need the oxygen concentrators and oximeters and other things. What we need now is funds and other things towards rehabilitation and taking care of the kids who have been rendered orphans. So the fundraising efforts have now shifted more towards rehabilitation rather than immediate emergency medical need. But we still are raising funds, and we would still like people to do the best they can by contributing to our COVID-19 relief efforts in India. Please go to vhpamerica.org, vhp-america.org, click on the donate button, and please do the best you can. We really can use all the help we can get for the COVID-19 relief effort in India. So that is our Hindu Seva Act of the Week. And finally, Utsada, as always, we go to our last segment, which is the Hindu Phobe of the Week, the most uh, anticipated segment of the show, and we keep the best for the last. So that this is this kind of sums up the Hindu phobia that exists around the world. And look at this, Utsada. Here is a, a tweet and a video that was originally posted by Mohammed Zubair, who is the founder of Alt News, which can be renamed Fake News. He posts a video of a Muslim person in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh who was beaten up and his beard was chopped off. Okay. The Quaint, which is an online publication, then created this cartoon where, and by the way, the narrative was that he was forced to say Jai Shri Ram, and while he was being beaten, and his beard was cut. Quaint, an online publication, leftist communist publication, then made a cartoon out of it, got uh, you know a lot of likes on it on Instagram and all that, and Twitter and Instagram. And then it turned out, Utsavda, that this was a rivalry, or I wouldn't say rivalry, but there's a history, a family feud kind of situation between a Muslim healer and some of the people who went to him for healing, and they didn't get healed, or some story like that. But it was a group of Muslims who beat up this Muslim person, Sufi Abdul Samad Safi. So the five goons, true, but they were all Muslims. They beat him up. There was no Jai Shri Ram involved. And this entire story was made up. And then people like Swara Bhaskar and people like the Quaint, the Hindu phobe of the week, Quaint, wrote up a story and created a cartoon, which eventually they had to withdraw. People like all the movie celebrities started writing about it, and there was an organization in US who invited someone from USCIRF and did a big show about it. They tried to do a show, but just a day before their show, the truth came out that there was really no Hindu Muslim kind of thing in there. All this towards the 2022 elections in Uttar Pradesh, or something more.
So first, I want to clearly name the Hindu hater of the week, the Hindu phobe of the week, and that is Mohammed Zubair, who is a co-host for the quote unquote fact checker news outlet Alt News. So Mohammed Zubair and Alt News are the Hindu phobe of the week. Having said that, let us look back at the story. There is Safi Abdul Samad Saifi, who is a Muslim self-proclaimed healer. Supposedly his healing abilities were not that good, so other Muslims catch him, cut his beard, beat him up, and make a video out of it. But Mohammed Zubair and a cabal of anti-Hindu activists in India come together package this video as if Hindus are beating up a Muslim, and that is happening in Yogi Adityanath state in Uttar Pradesh, which is coming. The elections are coming very soon, and then they even organize a hearing, briefing. Pardon my mistake. Briefing of US in the US Congress based on this fake incident. So it was all pre-planned and pre-packaged to incite violence in India, trying to show Hindus as the aggressors in the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is going to elections, all with just one objective: to target Hindus and make them look bad, specifically Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath. All of them backfire. All of them get exposed once it's the news comes out that the people who are doing this action against this old man, Muslim old man, were also Muslims. The whole story falls apart. But what it shows to the rest of the Hindu community is this: that if you think that there is a random effort to just influence elections in Uttar Pradesh and this is just part of a political game, step back. This is not part of a political. There is an organized effort globally to target Hindus, at the social level, to target Hindus at the perception level, and to demonize them and render them ineffective in the soft space, or in soft power space. And that is exactly what was attempted here. The hard power comes after that. Targeting of Hindus like they are targeted in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, even in some parts of India like Kashmir, Kerala, Bengal, that comes after this. So be very aware. Do not take this lightly. Expose the people who target Hindus in the soft power space, because they are the ones who will empower the hard power anti-Hindu people.
So that if this had gone to the US as a hearing on to US Congress, who would have spoke for Hindus? Is there anyone who would have a seat at the table to speak for the Hindus?
Hindu Pact should have a space at the table to speak for the Hindus, but I doubt if Hindus in America realize the need for that and need to empower organizations like Hindu Pact to have a seat at the table. Because you can bet that if this news was not exposed as being a fake news with a vile intention, there would have been hearing in the US Congress. There would have been a hearing that targeted Hindus in America, Hindus in India, Narendra Modi, and Yogi Adityanath. All of these people would have been targeted. And what will be worse is that targeting of Hindus in America and India would have been justified as a counter to that.
As a counter.
Exactly. So a fake news would have justified more targeting of Hindus, and everybody would have been fine with it. That's why we need Hindu Pact. That's why Hindu Pact needs to be empowered.
So this is just, I mean, the way the Hindus are being targeted in India and in America is just, I mean, I have not seen this in decades that I have been in America. And I think Hindu Pact.
I could hear the voice from your heart, Ajay bhai.
I'm telling you, so that we'll have to redouble our efforts and really, I think Hindus, another generation of Hindus cannot survive this kind of targeting. So that with that, we come to the end of this show. We couldn't play the music in the beginning, so I'm going to play the music from Decibels for just created for this show. This is really, really awesome music. And once again, it is Vikram Shankar, who is a professional musician, has joined Decibel in creating this music. And so that you can just see the professionalism and the dedication that they have and the kind of music they're creating every single week. And the hours go into creating the music. And just to have music created for this particular episode of the show, and I cannot thank them enough. This is just unbelievably great music. And so that with that, I am going to play the music. Thank you for joining, everyone. This is Hindu Pact. Hindu Pact is the policy research and advocacy initiative of World Hindu Council of America. Your co-host, Utsav Chakrabarti, executive director of Hindu Pact. And with Utsavda, as always, I am Ajay Shah. I am the president of World Hindu Council of America. And as we go, once again, Decibel music made just or created just for this episode of Hindu Lounge. And this time again, it is Decibel joined by Vikram Shankar for this amazing, amazing piece of music. As we go, here we go. Utsada, once again, I'm sharing the music, and this will play in the loop. Okay, so let me start the music and the share. So here we go with the music. Where is it? Just a second. And three, two, one, and here we go.